This conversation is around the topic of 100 years on, time for constitutional change, question mark. And I'm delighted to have a wonderful panel to discuss this really timely and interesting topic with. So this is Philip Smith, who's a former MLA for Strangford, as a councillor for Comber for the Ulster Unionist Party. Patricia McBride, who's former Commissioner for Victims and Survivors and a regular commentator in the media on politics and victims issues. Emma D'Souza, who's spokesperson for votingrights.ie and is well known around the world now for the case that she took in relation to Irish citizenship. And last but not least, Professor Pete Sherlow, who's Director of the Institute of Irish Studies at the University of Liverpool. So when we kick off, I'm just going to ask the question of the panel itself, which is, do you think it's time for constitutional change in Northern Ireland? And if yes, why? And what sort of constitutional change? And if no, why not? And in doing so, it'd be great if you could say a little bit about why you think that this topic is worth discussing. And particularly a sense of why you're here and taking part in this, I guess. So Patricia, I'll begin with you.
Hi, Katie, and hello, everybody else. It's nice to join you today. When we consider the question, is it time for constitutional change in Northern Ireland, we have to look back to the last big change, which is 100 years ago. And in June 1921, when King George V opened the Parliament in Stormont, he said, "Few things are more earnestly desired throughout the English-speaking world than a satisfactory solution to the age-old Irish problem. I would appeal to all Irish men," and I'll insert "and women," "to stretch out the hand of forbearance and conciliation, to forgive and forget, and to join in making for the land which they love a new era of peace, contentment and goodwill. The future lies in the hands of the Irish people themselves. May this historic gathering be the prelude to the day when the Irish people, north and south, under one parliament or two, as those parliaments may themselves decide, shall work together in common love for Ireland upon the sure foundations of mutual justice and respect." And, you know, when you look at those comments and you look at the issue of the treaty which partitioned the island of Ireland, one thing is evident to me anyway, in my interpretation of this, is that no one certainly in terms of in the Irish Republic, on either the pro-treaty or the anti-treaty side, believed that the partition of Ireland was a permanent, was going to be permanent. And certainly looking at the comments of the monarch on the day that the Stormont Parliament was established, this was very much something that was around ensuring that there was a solid foundation put in place for the development of positive relationships throughout this island, where people would govern themselves. And, you know, from the point of view of where we are now, I think it's time that we look at those, the constitutional changes that have happened and the growing demand and the groundswell of public opinion to start looking at how we best govern this island that we all call home. And it's evident that the current situation, the current arrangements aren't going to endure. Because if you look at the most recent Lucid Talk poll that was published on the 1st of February this year, only 34% of people that were polled believe that the North will still be part of the United Kingdom in 2050. So the question then becomes, if only a third of the people believe that the status quo is going to be maintained, what are we going to do to give effect to change?
Thank you very much, Patricia. Pete, I'll hand over to you next. You're on mute, Pete.
The condition of being old. I suppose what's relevant here is, of course, what's in the Good Friday Agreement with regard to majority of those voting to and who express in their voting that Northern Ireland should cease to be part of the United Kingdom. And I think it's first of all very important that we look at the data. I don't disagree with Patricia. I think we should be having conversations. I think we should be talking about how we make this a better island for everybody. I think that even if you're pro-union, I think that's something that should be taking place, and I think we should be building better relationships across the island. So this is not a hostility towards the South or anything like that. I think the protocol, etc., will help us define those relationships even better. But I think we have to look at the surveys, we have to look at election results, we have to have some basis upon which to decide where we're going or presently where we're at. So the Life and Times survey, Katie, you'll know this because you're involved with it. And I think it's very important to point out, because sometimes in social commentary, it's sort of like the surveys are made up. People who take part in the surveys are pro-union, pro-unity, and maybe some have a bit more sense and don't really care. But I think if we look at that over the period since 1998, you know, you have since then actually had a fall in the number of people who want Irish unification, very small fall from 24 to 22%. It has grown since from 15%. It did decline during the crash of the Celtic Tiger. So if you look at the surveys that you do, Katie, it's around 60-22 who express an opinion. That creates 82%. Some don't answer the question, some refuse to answer it, some have other arrangements, joint authority, etc. So basically, you know, if you look at those surveys over time, Ipsos Mori 2017, you know, QUB 2018, Liverpool 2019, you find the same thing. Now, Patricia just mentioned Lucid Talk, which is a very different polling methodology. And the survey that she just referred to showed a decline in those who want a united Ireland. So I think it's important we have that as a, whether you agree with the surveys or not, there is a data bank there. There is something for us to reflect upon. And of course, if we don't take the surveys seriously, then of course we have election results. And since 2001, if we look at Westminster, the DUP and the Ulster Unionists have seen a fall from 47 to 43%, but so has the SDLP and Sinn Féin. It's fallen from 42 to 37%. So even in the elections, there's been no substantial growth in a desire to meet the criteria for having a border poll. So I think it's important. It doesn't mean we don't have conversations, as I've said before. So what's happening? You know, one of the things that happened over that 20-year period was the alliance parties come from about 3% up to 16%. And we know from the surveys that we do that when you look at the alliance party, it's basically 53% for the union and 28% for unity. So there's an awful lot of information out there. You know, if you take the survey we did most recently, if you look at voters, it's 62-38. If you look at non-voters, it's 76-23 in favor of the union. So there's a real complexity here, which we need to understand. And I think what's also important is that we understand that this can change very rapidly. I have to be honest about the survey we did. There was a very significant decline in Catholics who supported the union. It went from around 21% down to 18%. There is change taking place. But at the minute, that's what the data actually says. And I think, Katie, you're talking about should we have this debate? And after we finish this conversation, I'm going back to a digital platform we've put together, which is Ireland's Future, Sinn Féin, the SDLP, the Ulster Unionist Party, Shared Island Podcast, and the PUP, and has over 100 voices, which we've captured across this island in this very discussion. So I think it's important that we understand and maybe get rid of this myth that people aren't talking about the constitutional issues. They are, from both sides. And I think whenever you see the material on this digital platform, you will see a very strong pro-union voice that wants to build relationships across this island, but which also wishes to remain in the UK. And I think, you know, data is important, and we you know, it doesn't mean it's not going to change 5-10 years time. Doesn't mean we're not going to have a different demography. I think we should all be aware of that, and that's why we should have conversations. We should put forward our perspective, and we should listen to the perspective of others.
Okay, thank you very much, Pete. Emma, over to you now.
Hi all, lovely to be with you. I think it's important to note the context in which this discussion is taking place. Brexit has dominated both the news cycle and much of our lives for the past 5 years, and it looks like it's not going anywhere. And in that time, we have undergone a seismic cultural and political shift. Unionism no longer has a majority in Westminster or in Stormont. More and more people are claiming their birthright to Irish citizenship, with over 830,000 people in the north now holding Irish passports. And an emerging middle ground to identify as neither unionist or nationalist continue to gain momentum. The impact of the UK's decision to leave the EU has, in my view, undeniably altered the trajectory of Northern Ireland. I would echo what Patricia said in saying that I do not believe that when Northern Ireland was constructed, it was ever intended to be a permanent fixture. I believe now that much like Germany, reunification is an unstoppable force and that we need to be prepared for that outcome. I joined the conversation for 3 reasons. 1, because of my personal conviction in ensuring that all the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement are fully adhered to add my voice to calls for a citizens' assembly and to be involved in the conversation. And thirdly, because I see this as an incredible opportunity to create a better Ireland for all of us, North and South. I envision a process where we can create a new yet familiar Ireland where all traditions are accounted for and valued. And I will equally listen to those who propose to remain part of the United Kingdom, as democracy and compromise have always served as intrinsic facets of progress and peacemaking in our shared history. And I welcome in particular Philip from Uniting UK today. 2 decades removed from the Good Friday Agreement, and our politics certainly feels more polarized than ever before. And it is that polarization which drives so many of our young people to shores unencumbered with these divisions. I too was one of those young people leaving the North as soon as I could for somewhere without so much division. Those who stay are forced to endure an oftentimes toxic political environment, which for many inevitably culminates in disengagement from politics entirely. An entire generation has grown up under the blanket of the Good Friday Agreement, a generation of ceasefire babies, as Lyra McKee would say. This generation are the beneficiaries of the Good Friday Agreement, and they voted overwhelmingly to remain part of the European Union. And their voices have all been but absent from the Brexit process, like so many others. I believe this generation, along with all generations here, do deserve the right to have a say in their constitutional future. Much of what has been happening over the past 5 years with Brexit, considering that the people of Northern Ireland didn't vote for Brexit, does feel almost like a democratic deficit. And I think really the solution is to allow people the democratic right to vote on what they want to see in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Philip, over to you now.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you very much for the invitation today. As Emma referred to, I'm here, I suppose, wearing my Uniting UK hat, and Uniting UK are a new pro-union campaign that believes Northern Ireland's place in the UK and its partnership with the South benefits us all. So we were a grassroots campaign that champions a united Northern Ireland in a better UK. And as you say, Katie, also other hats as well. I'm also an Ulster Unionist councillor in North and North Down, and formally and very briefly an MLA for Strangford in the recent past. So I suppose to take your questions, time for constitutional change. Yes, but maybe not in the way that you're thinking. I think there does need to be change within Northern Ireland and across the UK to improve the functioning of the Assembly and to create the right balance between devolution and Westminster, not only in Northern Ireland, but in Scotland, England and Wales as well. And of course, as Peter referred to earlier, I mean, there's been significant change already over the past 25 years via the Belfast Agreement, the introduction of devolution and all its structures, the Assembly, the Executive, the Policing Board, as well as also local government has had some semblance of reform. But if you're asking, is it time for change in Northern Ireland's constitutional status, and I don't think that it is time for that debate. I genuinely don't think that's what Northern Ireland needs now as we face the economic and social challenges that are going to result from the journey out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Added to the issues already referred to around Brexit, and the requirement to embed devolved government here after a 3-year break. I think that there are other priorities. I think for most people, improving our health service, our economy, and building a better society are the priorities. And I see no upside for adding more uncertainty and further division. I also see no evidence, as Peter referred to, that the tests set out in the Belfast Agreement for a border poll have been met. I think I remember, and I can't remember the name, but an Irish politician at the time of the Brexit referendum criticising David Cameron, saying that you should only hold a referendum if you have a fair idea what the result is going to be. And I think at this stage, there's no evidence to suggest that the status quo would not win. As has been mentioned, the last 3 elections in 2019 have shown that nationalism has not moved the dial in terms of its overall vote. So it does need to win some elections. And Patricia mentioned polls earlier. I mean, I was fascinated to see the latest Red C poll down south at the weekend. And people were asked, will there be a United Ireland in 10 years' time? Only 24% said yes. So not only is the argument not made, I believe, in Northern Ireland, but I don't think the argument has yet been made in the Republic as well. And interestingly, that poll showed 29% favouring Sinn Féin. So it's certainly not necessarily a pro status quo poll. So I think that the challenge here, as I say, is to for all of us to try and row in the direction to make Northern Ireland work better. And I think certainly research that we have done, particularly amongst the key decision makers in the future of Northern Ireland, which are those 20% of neithers who form the growing middle ground. And basically what they're saying is they want a future that is best for them and their families. And there's no evidence that they would be better off if Northern Ireland was absorbed into the Republic. I think research on comparative standards of living as opposed to headline GMP or headline salaries indicate that many would be worse off. I mean, I've looked at the McFlurry test, if you like, and compared what one costs in Belfast and Dublin. In Belfast, it's $1.39, and Dublin is £2.16. So, that I believe is a challenge that those arguing for change have to counter. So, people have seen the benefits of being part of the UK during this pandemic. We've had 4 billion of additional Treasury support. The NHS, of course, and over 500,000 vaccines to date have reinforced that view. And many see change as a risk, that they would be worse off, that the public sector would diminish, the health service would change, and politically and socially would be thrown into a state of flux. And of course, I mean, the Republic has had many successes and they should be celebrated, but we know that hasn't been shared evenly. And just to give you a finish, getting a couple of quotes here, it says, there could be no denying that inequality is rife throughout our health system. Our housing system is so utterly dysfunctional. Many workers currently earning the minimum wage are living hand to mouth each month. That's not me saying that. Those are quotes lifted from Sinn Féin's manifesto in 2020. So, if they're trying to sell a United Ireland, frankly, they're not doing a great job.
Thank you very much, Philip. I wonder if I can come back to you first in the follow-up question around why these conversations are worth having, and why you think it's worth engaging in these conversations. And in doing so, I'd like to ask you in particular, and I'll come to the others in due course, about what conversations around constitutional matters should cover. So if we think of constitutional matters are basically around principles of government and governance, they can cover everything from, the civil service to the role of the judiciary to, constraints on the powers of ministers, etc. So just if you could follow up in saying a little bit about, obviously you're keen to engage in these conversations, which is great. And maybe in relation to those principles, if you could touch on those a little bit about why these matters are important.
Okay, I mean, absolutely. I think that the conversations are essential, and I think dialogue is always the best way forward. And I think it's important, as I referred to in my first comments, that United UK has done research with the key neither voters, and what surprised me actually was the hunger for facts. People wanted, actually took quite a pragmatic and cold viewpoint of their future, and they want to know exactly what it means for them and their family. So it's important, I think, to have these debates, to share the information and put the facts out there in front of people. In terms of the constitution and change. As I said earlier, I mean, this is an evolving process. There has been tremendous change over the past 25 years, and the structures of government are now completely different than they were then when we had direct rule. But I think we need to see more change, primarily at three levels: at Northern Ireland, at the UK, and also islands wide. Obviously, I think Northern Ireland needs greater accountability. I mean, where else would we have the luxury of stopping government for 3 years and just letting things, tick over, or have a major party of government just ignoring public health regulations, or as well the plethora of scandals that just fades away without any consequences for anyone. So, I also think we need to migrate, getting beyond sectarian designation, especially if the others vote continues to grow. I mean, they're now at a level that was unforeseen when the Belfast Agreement was produced. So how will that look like, and what are the implications for an all-inclusive executive, for cross-community voting, and as well for petitions of concern? None of this was thought about when this was designed, when the expectation was that maybe 95% would either designate as unionist or nationalist. So we're very much in uncharted territory. I also think the UK needs to evolve further to decentralise, to empower the nations and the regions, including more devolutions for mayor and local government in England, as well as Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I think Westminster needs to focus on what it can do best at a UK-wide level, nationally and internationally. But also, I think we need to build structures for our shared islands, and I say that plurally rather than just shared island. Brexit has shown that we have significant overlaps. We have shared interests that need a proper forum, I think, for discussion and joint policy. And I think that's an area that we all should be able to agree on and try and put something in place to try and help us all move forward.
Thank you very much. Pete, do you want to follow up on why you think the Constitution matters?
Well, clearly it matters to a lot of people. And I think this is sort of maybe to pick up what Philip said about the changes that have taken place, constitutionally, such as devolution, etc. I'm quite happy to be called Irish or British or both. I think that's a growing trend within our society, that people understand that hybridity of identity. I think nations are imagined, and what really they count for is what they deliver for their people in terms of security and social protection, etc. If I think of my Britishness, it's radical ideas, anti-slavery, trade unionism, multiculturalism, ska, Sadie Smith. If I think of my Irishness, it's the landscape, the habits, the customs, and the affiliation I feel with people across this island. So I suppose, constitutionally, I don't think that's really the question here. I think the question is, how can we be more proficient and supportive of the Good Friday Agreement? And I remember the time of the Good Friday Agreement, there was a cartoon of a man standing in, Terrace Street, and the reporter was asking him a question: under which constitutional arrangement do you wish to be worse off? And we're not talking here about two sunny uplands, either Northern Ireland or the Republic. I think that's something we have to really understand. And I think we should also understand how critical the Good Friday Agreement has been. And I'm not going to sugarcoat Northern Ireland. I'm well aware of the structural issues within this place. But just look at what's happened since 1998. Belfast has become a world leader in cybercrime, fintech, and the film industry. You literally have this in front of your eyes. Drive across the Lagan or go on a train across the Dargan Bridge and look to your left and your right. We have built what is an economy which, in terms of technology growth, is only behind Zurich and Edinburgh. We have delivered this new economy, and I do understand the gig economy, and I do understand people are left behind right across Europe. But these new jobs are paying 10 grand more than the average median wage. You've had a 73% increase in median wages in Northern Ireland since 1998. You've had a 23% increase in employment, and you've had a 50% decline in unemployment. Now, let's just think about that. That's not sugarcoating Northern Ireland. That was produced by Republicans, Nationalists, and Unionists working together. That new society has been created because the Good Friday Agreement has socialised, despite the difficulties and the tensions, and we came out of a horrendous conflict. Those types of achievements can and are being delivered. Now, let's think about it another way. Let's think about the security we have achieved together as a people. In 1972, the police seized 20,000 kilograms of explosives. Last year, they seized around 1 kilogram. So the principle of consent is key to our future because it doesn't close down the options of constitutional preference. And I'm not so sure what you say about young people, because in the surveys that I do for the last 25 years, when you ask young people what's relevant to them, sectarianism has fallen off the list. The issues that they're talking about are drugs. The issues that they're talking about is family function. So I think we have to understand that as a people, us together, that we have taken away the horrors and the violence that we witnessed as a community up until 1968. And as I said earlier, the one thing I really am an advocate for is interdependence. I want there to be all island connections. I want there to be better ways that we make this island work together. I welcome the protocol. I think Article 11 in particular really hammers home. You've got your 8 or 9 or 10 cross-border bodies. The protocol talks about hundreds of north-south connections that we can build. And I can talk to you about how big and impressive the Belfast economy is. I can talk to you about how big and impressive the Dublin economy is. What about Derry and Limerick? What about that western seaboard, which has been left behind? And I think that's where you build connectivity. That's where you build mutual respect and parity of esteem, is when we work across this island to build a relationship, unionist, nationalist, Republican, or other, that we are framed by the desire to make the Good Friday Agreement work. And if we make the Good Friday Agreement work, then we're in a better position to decide what the constitutional future should be. This is a work in progress, but it illustrates one thing, and I'm sorry to say this for the third time, it illustrates one thing. All of that positive change that has taken place in our society has been delivered by unionists, nationalists, and Republicans together.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Patricia.
Well, I think what's interesting about the constitutional question is that you take it down to its bare bones, and a constitution is a framework that helps us to shape our values as a society and as a community. And it's something that needs to evolve. And I think that the opportunity that we're presented with in the debate around a border poll or the potential of reunification is to really get down to the bare bones of a society that we all aspire to have, and what are the values that we're looking for there in terms of, representation and accountability, and making sure that there's, that there are appropriate mechanisms there for our society to function. And that's why, one of the things that I'm a strong proponent of, and that the Ireland's Future Initiative has driven forward, is the notion of having a citizens' assembly, because I think that we need to look at those conversations around the type of society that we have. And it's interesting to pick up what Pete says about economic growth and the lack of it in some regions, because statistics that were produced by the ESRI last year showed that the economic inequalities in the Midlands and West region of the Republic of Ireland very closely mirrored those in the north of Ireland. So the Irish government has a problem. But I think we also have a problem in this constitutional conversation if we sort of assume that this is around bolting on one failed political entity in the north onto another one that isn't as advanced as it should be in terms of where it sits in Europe. So we do have an opportunity to build something from the ground up, and I think that that's what's most exciting. And I take on board what Philip is saying, I think, and what Pete has said, that we do need to make the institutions here work, because it's about, for me, that's about being confident enough in our own abilities and in the systems that we have put in place to be able to say, well, let's scale this up. Let's scale this up into an all islands economy, into an economy and a social care system, whether that's around healthcare, whether that's around how we provide for people in need, whether, how we deal with crime on an all island basis. We have a level of cooperation across very many areas, but the more that we can develop that and grow it and ensure that we have the capacity to work cooperatively north, south, and east and west, then the better our society will be. But we have to do that from a foundation of what is possible and from imagining what the society that we want at the end of this all is going to look like.
Thank you, Patricia. Emma, why do you think the Constitution matters?
Well, of course, constitutions provide the basic legal framework for democracy and rule of law. And I think it's important to note that the Good Friday Agreement is considered by many as a constitution for Northern Ireland. And yet, many provisions within the Good Friday Agreement remain unimplemented or misimplemented. We are now 2 decades on, and the principles of parity of esteem, mutual respect, and equality are far from embedded into this society. So I think I echo what Patricia said in terms of seeing an opportunity ahead of, establishing a strong constitution that does embed those principles. Under the current constitutional framework that we have, it's hard to say that the institutions are really working. Right now in the year of the centenary, we have threats of Stormont being collapsed again by political leaders. And that would mark the 6th time that Stormont has collapsed since 1998, if that did actually happen. And when you see this constant threat of the institutions being collapsed by political representatives, you really do have to ask, well, is this working? And I think that that's something that a lot of people are considering when they look at the possibility of constitutional change. Is this working? And as an Irish citizen in the North who has been told by Unionist political representatives that if I want to be so Irish, I can go across the border to Donegal, I think that that's something that a lot of people feel in the North in terms of, is Northern Ireland right now working? And is the constitutional entitlements and benefits and protections of the Good Friday Agreement really there for us to be able to rely on them? And I don't think that it currently is.
Can I ask you, Emma, Philip touched a wee bit on making Stormont function better, and you're saying a little bit about that too in relation to the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. Is there something in particular that you think should be prioritised with regards to making Northern Ireland work better at this current moment?
Yeah, I think that the petition of concern absolutely needs to be changed. I think that the use of the cross-community vote has been, that's been used in a way that it was not intended to whenever it came to COVID-19 regulations. That has to end. I think that we have to consider whether mandatory coalition is working. And I think that there needs to be more space for those who designate as neither unionist or nationalist in the executive and within Northern Ireland, because the perpetual narrative of Northern Ireland as unionist or nationalist, in my view, does not reflect the diversity of the Northern Ireland we have here today. And I think that really these labels are used more as a way to box us in and, almost to put us in a situation where we are perpetually segregated. And I think that in order for there to be true reconciliation, we have to move past these designations.
Thank you, Emma. Patricia or Pete, do either of you want to come in on that?
I just want to say one thing. I deplore that anybody said to Emma that because of her identity, she should go and live in the Republic. I think that's despicable. And most certainly, I think, doesn't speak for people like Philip and I, who believe in the Good Friday Agreement and who strongly support the hybridity and the choice of identity. I think that's a very important thing to say. And I think it's important, incumbent upon all of us to challenge any racism, homophobia, sexism, gendered or ethnic type abuse of anybody in our society. And anybody who does that harms not only the union, but they also harm any prospect of a united Ireland. It is critically important that we condemn that type of rhetoric and language in our society.
Thank you, Pete. Patricia, did you want to say anything on Stormont, the operation of Stormont?
The key to making Stormont work is to stop talking about respect and actually be respectful. There's no big mystery there. There is a duty on there is a responsibility and a duty on MLAs and political parties who are elected to represent their constituents to work together for the common good, and they just have to do it. It's as simple as that.
Now, I'm afraid I'm going to mention the B word. Emma's already mentioned it, so I'm not the first at least. But do you think Brexit is constitutionally significant? And in particular, I'm thinking, of course, about the context within which we're speaking, i.e. the context of the Protocol in Ireland and Northern Ireland, which Peter's already mentioned, which some people have pointed to as being hugely constitutionally significant for Northern Ireland, including in relation to the principle of consent, perhaps. So I'm just going to, we won't spend too long on this, but if you do think it's constitutionally significant, Brexit and or the protocol, could you say why and where it might be, what might the consequences of that be? Pete, I'll start with you.
Well, the very first thing, and I really don't want to sound arrogant, I wish people who talk about the protocol would actually go and read it. It's not a very long document, it's a very complex document. And I think they should go and read Article 11 in particular and look at what's planned in terms of north-south connectivity. And I think that's critically important. I think also, why are we not talking about the benefits of the protocol? If I went out of this room now and went to talk to business people in Liverpool and said, I can offer you to be in the EU customs code and be also the UK customs territory, they would hug me. They would be going, what opportunity is that? And that maybe goes back to the question about political leadership. You know, the Brexit started with a threat of violence, and we're still in it now, another threat of violence. And the protocol actually speaks much more to a whole range of opportunities for trade and investment, both within Northern Ireland and across the island. I think what's also important is if you read the protocol and you look at what the Equality Commission, North and South, their status now is that whole protection of rights and safeguards and equality of opportunity. The protocol actually, I think, is an extension in many ways of the Good Friday Agreement, or the protection of the Good Friday Agreement. I don't think we're saying that loudly enough. I think it's really important that we understand that if the EU amends and updates EU equality laws, that the same thing happens here. I think it's important that we understand that the protocol protects against discrimination on gender, ethnic origin, religion, belief, disability, sexual orientation, and promotes equal treatment. I think it's critically important that we recognise that additional resources have been pumped in by the government to cover the programmes and the costs to ensure that those rights are implemented and overseen and delivered within Northern Ireland. So I think it's time to start having a different conversation about the protocol. I think it's a time to have a conversation about how it builds equality, how it builds new economic opportunities, how it will connect our universities, and how it will build other relationships which can only, after a period of time, be beneficial to all of us.
Yeah, there's nothing in Brexit itself that threatens the constitutional status of the North explicitly, but what it has done is to create a space for constitutional conversations to take place, predominantly because people who are Irish citizens living in the North and those who voted against Brexit had to consider and now have to sort of accelerate their consideration of whether or not they feel that they would be better served as Irish and European citizens within the EU. But what Brexit does do is that it acknowledges that the constitutional status of the North has always been different, insofar as the protocol has at its heart upholding the Good Friday Agreement. And the Good Friday Agreement, as we all know, is about promoting positive North-South and East-West relationships in terms of how we manage the North of Ireland and you know, support for the Assembly, support for devolution. So, you know, let's look at how we can best challenge or channel the opportunities, as Pete says. I mean, I was listening there the other day, and I was actually commenting on it on radio as well, about the decision of the DUP minister to cease all work on border control posts and recruitment of personnel to carry out border checks after the end of the transition period. And, you know, what occurred to me was, you know, why are you doing this? I mean, there's such an opportunity for our businesses and industries to thrive because of the economic, I suppose, unique economic circumstances that we find ourselves in. So I don't think that anything in that dilutes anyone's British identity. I just cannot understand how ensuring that goods come into the North, stay within the United Kingdom, dilutes anybody's British identity. And, you know, it's an opportunity there that we can have, you know, a very strong economy and to build upon the opportunities we've been presented.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia. Who wants to come in next? Philip, do you want to say something?
Yes, I suppose question, is Brexit constitutionally significant? I suppose like everything it can be if that's the outcome you want. I suppose for context, cards on the table, I voted for and campaigned for Remain because I believed EU membership contributed to a more stable and prosperous Northern Ireland. But obviously it was a national UK poll with a national result that as a Democrat, I had to accept. I appreciate that many people saw the loss of their EU membership as a major issue, and for some it may change their view on the constitutional issue, although I've yet to meet a unionist who has made that particular journey due to Brexit. The Northern Ireland Protocol, I believe, is a major problem, both at a practical level and constitutionally. I think at a practical level, no matter your politics, everyone is being affected. I know, Katie, you've talked from pets to plants, but there's also supermarket availability, the access to goods from GB, and we're all paying the price. And I read yesterday that 60% of freight coming back from GB is transporting fresh air, and that's obviously unsustainable. And this, of course, is all before the grace periods run out. So I don't want a hard border anywhere in these islands, either on the island of Ireland nor in the REC. But remember, in terms of volume of trade, 5 times more trade takes place between Northern Ireland and GB than takes place between Northern Ireland and the Republic. And the protocol is making this trade very difficult. I appreciate for some there is an opportunity here, but the downside at the moment far outweighs the pluses at this time. So in the short term, we need a tranche of mitigations to reduce the impact on the Northern Ireland economy. Then, as been mentioned, it's a constitutional issue. So we're told that a border in Ireland would contravene the Belfast Agreement, yet at the same time, it doesn't seem to affect an REC border. That can't be right. The protocol, I believe, contravenes the Belfast Agreement by changing the nature of Northern Ireland's status without consent, and indeed, the Article 18 consent element in turn contravenes the Belfast Agreement by not adhering to a cross-community vote. So that simple majority, in my opinion, breaches the Belfast Agreement. So unionists obviously are challenging the protocol legally. They're also pushing for mitigations to reduce the economic impact in the short term. And I believe we'll continue to campaign to replace the protocol with more sensible and less damaging proposals that will continue to protect the EU single market. So, Katie, I suppose in conclusion, America, the Irish government, the EU, and many political parties in Northern Ireland said that the Belfast Agreement is paramount in the Brexit process. I agree, but why is it not paramount for the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Irish Sea border too? I think we at least need to get consistency around that.
And we also need to remember that it was the British government that agreed to and negotiated the protocol with the EU 27, so they did consent.
Thank you. Emma.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to continue to say that constitutionally, the status of Northern Ireland has not changed. And the status of Northern Ireland constitutionally will only change through a vote on the constitutional question. So I think that's an important starting point. I do note, and of course, the concerns that we all have with the Northern Ireland Protocol are valid in terms of ensuring that it's properly implemented. But I think it's important to acknowledge that the Northern Ireland Protocol was what we were left with. It is a compromise that is there to try to protect the Good Friday Agreement. And that really, in my view, there's no version of Brexit that can satiate the desires of hardline Northern Brexiteers and actually protect the Good Friday Agreement. I think that Brexit isn't constitutionally significant, in itself to the Good Friday Agreement, but I do think it makes some provisions very difficult to adhere to, such as parity of esteem and equality between citizens. I think that it's not often talked about, but the fact that Irish citizens in Northern Ireland will have different set of rights to British citizens in Northern Ireland does create some friction there with the Good Friday Agreement. In terms of those who are taking litigation forward for the Northern Ireland Protocol, we have to accept the fact that the Northern Ireland Protocol is an international agreement that is now part of domestic UK law. Those taking forward litigation are perfectly within their rights to do so. It's part and parcel of being in a democratic society. but they are also elected representatives, many of them, and they need to be honest about what it is that they're trying to achieve, because many of those involved in the litigation actually never supported the Good Friday Agreement. And many have also said that they want to see a border on the island of Ireland. So I think it's really important that we have some honesty in this discussion in terms of what the intention is behind those who are trying to remove the Northern Ireland Protocol, and accept the fact that the Northern Ireland Protocol isn't going anywhere. It is the law. So thank you.
If I can add another point, is that okay? Yeah. I think there's also something interesting. You know, we were told Brexit would be a game changer. It was a game changer in terms of elections. People went to the Alliance Party. It didn't drive the Nationalist Republican vote. It most certainly didn't drive the Unionist vote. Both declined. More people went to the Alliance Party, and increasingly, more people went to the Alliance Party from the DUP and Ulster Unionist Party. So one of the things we have to recognise in our society, it doesn't seem to be the constitutional issue that is driving people to the polls. What it is people who are socially liberal and generally pro-Europe who went to the Alliance Party. So issues around social rights, equality, and Brexit drove people to the Alliance Party. It did not drive people to the four main parties. It did the very opposite.
I would actually come in there too, just to echo that point, Peter, in terms of unionists moving towards the Alliance Party. I think, you know, behind that is the fact that political unionism has united at the minute behind Brexit and united behind the Northern Ireland Protocol. And in doing so, they actually alienate many within political unionism who are more liberal, more socially progressive, and of course, those who actually voted against Brexit or who support the Northern Ireland Protocol. This perception that unionism is an all-encompassing one body that moves together and is all opposed to the Northern Ireland Protocol and entirely opposed, you know, to this situation isn't reflective of political unionism or the unionist community, because all communities do have a diversity of opinions and views, so they are actually losing their base.
And also, Emma, a third of those who voted in 2017, who voted in 2019, came from Sinn Féin.
So we're heading now towards the end of the session, so I will try and do an enormous question to bring it all together, which gives you scope to pick up the element that you're most interested in or that you'd like to say something about. And this is constitutional change across these islands. So I think my question is, what do you think is would you most like to see in terms of constitutional change, if you want to see it either in the UK or in the Republic of Ireland, vis-a-vis the Constitution? I'm thinking of, obviously, the issues around potential Scottish independence, as well as the transformation of the Irish state that we've seen in recent years. Philip, I'll begin with you as head of, with your Uniting UK hat on.
Thanks, Katie. I suppose that the biggest change I would like to see is that everybody in Northern Ireland rowing together in the same direction. I mean, Patricia referred to, you know, a failed political entity of Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, I mean, that's self-fulfilling, and I think that it's been my belief for a long time that, you know, whatever your constitutional aspiration is, you know, surely there's benefit in us all working for the same outcome, which is a better Northern Ireland. You know, if you're a nationalist and you aspire to United Ireland, well, surely it makes sense to have Northern Ireland the best place it can be, because it will minimise any potential cost to the Republic, and more likely to insure people down south. Again, I refer back to the Red C poll at the weekend. You know, only a small minority feel that there will be a United Ireland within the next 10 years. So, and equally for unionists, you know, if unionists want Northern Ireland to be a success, then, you know, it has to embrace everybody in Northern Ireland and make Northern Ireland work for them, and also try and make our economy work better so it reduces the burden on the GP taxpayer. So I think that there is a vision there that I would hope everybody could get on board with. And certainly the research that we've done in United UK on these key middle road neither voters who will ultimately make the decision, because we've roughly, and Pete talked earlier about the voting breakdown. So you've just over 40% voting unionist, under 40% voting nationalist, and this big 20% in the middle. Ultimately, they're going to make that decision. But when you talk to people in that group, they want Northern Ireland to work. I mean, that's their bottom line, and they're willing to give it a chance. And they also see the benefit of being part of the larger UK entity. And as I said, the pandemic has illustrated that for many people, that the UK provides big pockets and a big market. And it's about getting the benefit that it also amplifies Northern Ireland's voice nationally and internationally. And here we are this year with the UK hosting the environmental conference in Scotland. We have chairing the G7. Chairing the IMF. We are playing at a big global level, and we have the opportunity in Northern Ireland to participate in that. So I would like to see Northern Ireland, it does punch above its weight nationally in so many areas, and it would be good to be able to replicate that at a political level as well. So I think that has to be an aspiration going forward.
Thank you, Philip. Emma.
Thank you. Well, firstly, constitutionally, I'd like to see an independent Scotland. And I do think that is an eventuality that we will all be facing over the next number of years. And I think that will change the dynamic of politics across this island and islands. In terms of constitutionally here on the island of Ireland, as I've made clear, I believe that a united Ireland or reunification or a new Ireland, whichever language you choose to use, is the best outcome for the people on this island, north and south. I think that there are many barriers to true reconciliation, and that the real answer, the real way to break down those barriers to reconciliation is actually going to be in the form of reunification, because I think that process will then be quite cathartic for people in terms of breaking down those barriers. I would love to see a lot of changes to the Irish Constitution, because the Constitution in Ireland currently reflects more of the 1930s than it does of the progressive society that is now down there today. And I, of course, support the extension of presidential voting rights to Irish citizens abroad. I'm already involved in that campaign. But there's loads of other parts of the Constitution that I would also like to see change in terms of Seanad reform, in terms of being able to vote from remote voting. And I think that another thing that I'd like to touch on just to close is what Philip was saying about the neithers in Northern Ireland wanting to see Northern Ireland work. Well, as someone who has very openly said that I am a neither, I don't identify as unionist or nationalist. I want to see Ireland work, and I want to see the people of Ireland, reunified in a way that is meaningful. I think that it is possible, of course, to identify as neither unionist or nationalist, but still have an opinion on the constitutional question. These things are not exclusive. And I think that we need to accept that there is a diversity within Northern Ireland that is moving towards that outcome. And so, yes, that would be my conclusion. I think the way to move forward is to move past these binary labels and start seeing each other first and foremost as people, not defined by our political or religious ideologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. You've just complicated academic analysis of the neithers, I have to say. Pete, over to you. You're muted again.
I nearly swore. I'm not going to comment in Scotland if you redact anything in what I say. I think one of the things you have to realise, I read once, I think the British pensions, 70% of British pensions are invested in North Sea oil. So what happens in Scotland is very important for all of us. I think Scotland going, if it does go, it may spook unionism. I think that is the case. But it may also be a very chaotic process. It may be a Brexit plus, and if Scotland unravels from the UK, it may make people go, is it worth having that sort of breakup divorce scenario here on the island of Ireland? And I think also, the comparisons between the two places are different. Northern Ireland is, whether we like it or not, largely an ethnic issue, and it's not really that issue in Scotland. And we've got to remember, if you're looking for civic leadership, the SNP used to be a very Protestant party. Former leaders condemned the Pope coming to Scotland in the 1970s. And they were very much able in building that civic message to get beyond Scottish sectarianism. I think there's a wider point here, and the question about the Constitution and what would you like to see in the South. And I'm going to contradict myself and hopefully prove the point. When we have this debate, do we want to play rhetorical tennis? Northern Ireland's better than the Republic's better than Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland's better than the Republic's better than Northern Ireland. You know, so when Patricia says that Northern Ireland's broken, you know, automatically, you know, people are going to say, well, 73% growth in wages since 1998, the removal of violence, 43% growth in employment, growth in new industries, you know, halving unemployment. People are going to come back with that. And I think obviously if people from a pro-union background, you know, when we're told that the South is this sort of nirvana, and I know, and this is where I agree with lots of Republicans, it's not. It's like any other Western society, it's deeply flawed. But I think it's important we look, if you're asking us to join this other society, and it may well be that you want it to be a very different place, but let's just go through a few things. The equivalent of 27% of the people in Ireland, in the south of Ireland, 819,000, are waiting for hospital appointments, waiting for appointments. You know, I hear all the time about the NHS is creaking and falling. Well, the health service in the south is also creaking and falling. We as a people on this island should be shocked at that citizens are waiting for treatment. Video Doc Ireland showed that more than half the people in the Republic Google their symptoms in hopes of avoiding GP costs. The Journal of General Practice has noted in the Republic, 1 in 4 adult patients who have to pay to see the doctor during a 12-month period don't go because of the cost. Newton Emerson recently showed that more young people in Ireland can't afford to live, to buy or rent a place. The largest increase, according to Eurostat, the largest increase in housing costs over the last 10 years were in Ireland. Housing costs in Ireland are now 77% above the EU average. You can buy a house, an average price of a house in Northern Ireland is 141k. The average price of a house in the south is 269k. That's the difference between 173k repayment or 389k, nearly £400,000 repayment in the south. Social Justice Ireland have shown that 10% of Irish households receive 3% of the country's disposable income. And the top 10% earn 24% of the national income. 300 people in Ireland control 100 billion of the wealth. The central bank 2 weeks ago showed that there's been no rise in individual consumption in the 26 counties since 1998, despite this phenomenal economic growth. You know, what the central bank said 2 weeks ago, Ireland is a prosperous country, but not as prosperous as is often thought because of the inappropriate use of misleading, albeit conventional statistics. You have a problem in Ireland, a major problem in the south of Ireland. It's a massive wealth creator. For whom? For whom? Where does that wealth go? You're talking about paying for your doctor. You're talking about paying for the ambulance service and the fire service when it comes to your home. You're talking about 45% less public expenditure. I'm sure everybody in this room supports the public purse paying for social welfare, etc. The OECD 2 weeks ago brought out a report. Ireland is only second to America in the share of the population that is working poor, that earns 2/3 of that. So I could go on, and I'm sure people here could go on about Northern Ireland, and they could say about the structural deficiencies here. But if we are going to have this conversation, and Patricia did say this earlier on, we cannot have a conversation of rhetorical tennis. We have to be honest, the term that Patricia used, we have to be honest about both places. There are fundamental, the south of Ireland has abandoned its rural poor. It has abandoned its rural communities. The wealth in Ireland, GDP, is twice as much as produced in Dublin than anywhere else. Massive disparities. The disparity between Ireland or Dublin and the rest of Ireland is greater than the disparity between Belfast and London. So look, if you're going to have this conversation, if it's about social justice, it's about social justice for everybody on the island, and it's about everybody pro-union, nationalist and Republican, not having that rhetorical debate that I've just rehearsed. It's about actually having a proper debate about what needs to be fixed and what needs to be fixed within your constitutional preference, and you delivering ideas on how that can be fixed.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Patricia.
I lost track halfway through Pete's statistical analysis there, I have to be honest. You know, this isn't about statistics. You know, we can do that rhetorical tennis that you talk about back and forth as much as you like. There will always be things wrong. You know, the north of Ireland has abandoned its rural poor as well. You know, there's always going to be issues. There's still 323,000 people on NHS waiting lists in the north. You know, nothing is perfect, and that's the whole point of having these conversations, is saying, how do we make it better for the people that call this place home? And in terms of Scottish independence, I think what it can do and what it has done is inform the debate about constitutional change in Ireland, because we saw what happened in terms of the previous referendum, where people weren't sure what they were voting for. And that's for my money, that's why the referendum fell, the question fell, because people weren't sure what a new independent Scotland would look like. And I'm kind of on the page with Philip's Red Sea poll. I don't think that there'll be a united Ireland within 10 years, in the sense that there will be a new government in place and new structures around healthcare and education. But I do honestly believe that the foundations for all of those changes will be in place. And I think that they'll be in place because we are seeing the opportunity to cooperate more and more in terms of the provision of health and social care services, in infrastructure projects, in university research projects, and all of those things. As all of those things become embedded as the norm, and as all island cooperation becomes embedded, we will begin to see the, you know, not only the economic advantages of a single island economy and a single island approach to health or education, even if it's only in areas such as pediatric cardiac surgery. But those small steps actually make a huge difference in people's perceptions. And just one issue around the Constitution, in terms of the Irish Constitution, for me, a key element that I think the whole thing needs to be looked at. I think you start and you say, look, you know, this is, if you're going to create a new island, then it's a new constitution. It's something that everyone feels that they have ownership of. And one of the key elements of that is looking at the 27th Amendment, which previous to its enactment in 2005, anyone who was born on the island of Ireland had a right to Irish citizenship, and now they only do if at least one of their parents is an Irish citizen or is entitled to be an Irish citizen. And I don't want anybody who lives in this island to face what Emma faced, because I don't want anybody who identifies as British having to renounce their citizenship in order that their child can claim Irish citizenship. So that's a key constitutional issue for me, around the birthright provisions in the Irish Constitution that would need to be changed in order to protect everybody's rights and identity on this island. So I think we have an opportunity here that I don't think that reconciliation, sorry, just one final point, I just made a note about what Emma said. I don't think that reconciliation is a prerequisite for reunification, because what we have to do is we have to become we have to accept that people are where they are, and we have to meet people where they are. You know, this isn't about asking anyone to step back or to resile from who they are and what their beliefs are. It's about asking them to bring those beliefs and that identity forward to help shape something that's a better place for all of us to live.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. So we have to wrap up there now before I get in trouble, but thank you so much to each of you, Patricia, Emma, Peter and Philip, for engaging in a really interesting conversation. These are big issues, complicated issues, and obviously affect the very fundamentals of values and identities and life experience. So thank you for engaging in this, and I know that we're going to have many more interesting conversations to come, and I hope they'll continue to be as constructive as this one. So thank you all very much, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.